Hey there. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am here with Phillip Lanos, and we are going to talk about the power of podcasting and how it can really improve your human connection in this digital world that we've all been kind of thrust into. Phillip is a host right now for Entrepreneur Magazine's podcast, Action and Ambition. He wrote and self-published his book, Pushing Past the Norm. He makes music for a group named Egomori as a vocalist. You can hit him up on Spotify over there. We'll put the links for you too in the notes. And his dream is to become a professional life coach. Thanks so much for being with me today, Phillip. I'm excited to talk with you even more on camera because we were chatting for quite a while off camera. So again, thanks so much for joining us today.
No, I'm stoked. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am too. So I'm sure that you get this question a lot, but most people that are not already interested in podcasting, they want to know, is a podcast the right move for them? You know, you probably get asked, should I even start a podcast? Like, why a podcast? And so what is your typical kind of like canned response for people that ask that general question?
Okay. I always go back to two conversations I had with people. One was with someone who founded the Content Marketing Institute. His name is Joe Polizzi, sorry. And then David Cadavy is the other person who published a book on design that hit #1 bestseller on Amazon right now. Now, Joe Polizzi said basically he had been doing content marketing and had an email newsletter, right? And he used podcasting as a way to supplement the content that he was delivering to his audience because it is long form. It's not the same as like if you're using it, basically, he said, to launch your brand, it's going to be harder. It's not impossible, but it's not the place of podcasting in the view of Joe Polizzi, who founded Content Marketing Institute. Now, given the depth and width and breadth of his understanding of content marketing, I would take that into consideration, right?
Yeah.
Second point, David Cadavy, who is this dude never stops writing, and he wrote a book on design because he comes from like designing applications and software. And he said when he started his podcast, the only reason he started it was because he was looking for a podcast that did what his podcast does. And he said the minute someone does it better, if they try and they do it better, he'd quit making his podcast because he just wanted to listen to something like that. Now, that in its essence, I think is powerful because often what people will do, same way when they make content with, let's say they want to be the next Gary Vee, is something that people often do when they're making content. And it's like, if somebody's already doing it and you're not doing it better, really reconsider what you're doing and think back to an even more humane way of looking at it. Let's step out of the business world for a second. Musicians are always like, when they're asked, well, how did you guys come up with this? Well, really, we wanted to hear a certain type of music, but we couldn't find it, so we just made it ourselves. That's really the way you should be looking at the type of content you're doing, unless it's specifically business related and you think your take on whatever vertical you want to speak on really merits starting something like that.
I think that's a great piece of advice there. And not only just for podcasting, like filling that void, right? And that's how a lot of us create our own products, programs, offers, whatever. We know that we had a need at some time for something and we couldn't find it. So we created it, right? And so it's the same thing with podcasting. It's the same thing with coaching programs, physical products, right? If you think about all the as seen on TV products, right? Those are things that people needed or they wanted and they couldn't find it. So they made it themselves, right? So I think that's, it's brilliant, really. And whenever we can fill that void and do it in a way that nobody else is doing it, even if there are other people doing it, we can do it in our own specific way, then that's where we're going to start gaining our following, right? That's where we're going to start impacting more people. I really like what you said, though, about if your strategy behind starting up a podcast is to launch something, probably not the best strategy. And I totally agree with that. I see a lot of people asking, okay, I have no list, I have no following, and I want to launch my product. How do I start? And yesterday I read this, that was a question in a post online, and somebody said, start a podcast. I was like, that's probably not where I would begin. to start getting my following, right? But I love the idea of it having as a supplement to what it is you're already doing. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a podcast and you want to launch something while you have the podcast, then now you have this audience of, listeners or viewers, and you can now, propose that to them. But yeah, I totally agree with you. If you're just kind of starting from scratch, and you want to gain some following and some momentum to launch your offer or product, starting the podcast is probably not the first thing that I would do. So, So what are some tips for people, or maybe like your top 3 pieces of advice for people that are just getting started in the podcasting space to be more successful? Right. I know what mine would be. And I'm not even an expert in podcasting, believe me. Like, I don't even pretend to be one on TV. So, but I want to know from you, with your background and your expertise, what are your top 3 tips for success for somebody just starting out in the podcasting world?
Okay, so let's suppose you already launched your podcast and your friends and family are listening, which is the general rule of thumb, right? So, like,
Yeah.
at that point, you actually have to define what success looks like for you. I think in any endeavor that you're doing, it always helps to have what the letter Z looks like so that you know how far away you are. Are you at A, B, C, D, E, F, G? You need to have an end goal that you can measure progress against. Otherwise, anywhere you get to is fine, and
Yeah.
that seems rudimentary and like very basic, but it's a powerful concept that a lot of us gloss over because we're so focused on doing things instead of having a clear vision, which pretty much, I think the challenge with having a clear vision, and it's important that this is stipulated, is because the challenge behind having a clear vision is that it means you have to set aside other things as not going to be doing them.
Yeah.
And we don't believe in limitations. So I would say having a clear vision and setting limits to what you will do and won't do in order to achieve that is going to be very important in being able to even make any progress beyond having friends and family listening to it. That's my first one.
That's great. I'll say, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know when you get there.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
That was simple.
Yeah, it was unpacking that specific statement and why it matters. Second piece, let's say you do have a clear vision, right? And you know where you're going, you know who you're talking to. Then it determines what is it for, right? You know who it's for, but what is it for? What are you doing this for? Are you doing it just to build your following and that's going to be good enough for you? Well, then the thing you can use to measure it, right, is going to be, did you get at least one new follower today, one new person? And that makes it very easy because now you need to go out into the world, whether it's through digital or when you're walking around the store, and connect with someone and say, hey, you know what? That reminds me of the type of conversations that I have on this show. Right.
So hold on. You're telling me in this digital space, I have to physically talk to people in person in real life?
I know. But believe me, the thing is that podcasting is a conversational tool. Therefore, if you find someone who speaks your lingo and likes to jump in on those conversations, let's say you go to the store and you're checking out and you start talking, and usually it's surface level.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get really into something with someone that you run across. That's somebody who you need to bring into the world that you're doing online.
Yeah.
Right? From offline to online and online to offline.
Yeah. Okay. So number 1, set your expectations, basically.
Yeah.
What's your vision?
Yeah.
Number 2,
connect.
What's the goal? Connect, but define your goal for the podcast.
Yeah. Like, what's it for? Yeah.
3.
Number 3, I would say, okay, so you have your vision, you know who it's for, you know what it's for, right? I would say now, whatever you do, be willing to change if you have to based on that information, right? A lot of the times people find out what it's for, who it's for, but then they want to keep doing the same things that they've been doing because we'll get into this habit, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want to make this more than just make sure you're willing to change, right? I would say there's a thing in the acting world, right? And I think this is an important tool that you can throw anywhere in your life. There's a thing in the acting world called active listening, right? And what that means is, if you want to be a better podcaster, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have your audience, this and that, but then it comes down to you creating a space for the conversation to actually exist. So there's active listening, and this is at least in my acting class, this was taught. But I think all great actors do this. Now, there's three modes that you listen through. There's actively accepting, actively rejecting, right, or actively confused. And it's important that you understand that in a podcast, when you're having a conversation with someone, your job, for the most part, with the exception of interjecting with questions that sort of lead the conversation, is to listen. And if you ever find yourself self-conscious and you start wondering if you're doing something right or this, just pay attention. Am I actively accepting? And if so, what am I accepting here? What am I agreeing to, right? Am I actively rejecting? What am I disagreeing with, right? Or am I actively confused? Because then that informs your question. Then you can, based on what you've accepted, oh, right. Now, what does that mean, right? Or no. What do you mean by that? Or what do you mean by that? Can you rephrase that? And it's okay to be actively confused as long as you understand that's the state of listening that you're currently engaged in. But
Right.
those three levels are very important. If you want to be a better communicator, you have to be a better listener.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's not just in podcasting, that's in everything, in digital and in real life, IRL.
IRL.
So I love what you said about the connection. So podcasting, yes. If you're on the fence about starting one, start one. What's it going to harm? I say my main piece of advice, aside from what you've just said, is consistency.
Yeah.
And even if you're starting a podcast, to challenge yourself to do something on a regular basis, right? Maybe this has nothing to do with followers or more exposure or selling products or whatever. Maybe it's just for you to do something on a consistent basis. And this is going to force you to show up at a specific time. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's twice a week, however you want to do it. But so consistency to me was a big challenge when I started, and I'm getting better at it. And I'm seeing the fruits of that consistency now. And it's paying off, not just in the podcast video world, but I'm making more connections with people, which is the other part of why podcasting is so powerful. But I'm also proving to myself that I can follow through and do what I said I would do. And I think that, to me, that's very important. I operate from integrity. And if I don't show up for myself, right, and do the things that I say I'm going to do, even if I'm not telling anybody that I'm doing those things, then how am I going to start showing up for other people? So to me, it's really important, the consistency piece.
That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of a Japanese practice that I think culturally is catching on the West here. I know a lot of influencers have been shown, like business influencers. It's called ikigai, right? Ikigai. And it's I think it's basically your reason to live. And I don't know if you've heard of the story of the Tokyo based sushi parlor bar that there's an elderly Japanese man who's making sushi in like the smallest hut inside the subway area, and he does that, and he's been doing it for years. And to him, the very act of making the sushi brings him down, calms him down, makes him feel like life, like you said, there's this consistency, and just the act of doing it is enough. And you're right, we're in this goal-driven world, we do have to have something that's just for us. And it might be for others too. You never know.
Well, while I'm being consistent and showing up for myself, I'm also out here consistently showing up for others. And whether, I don't put a lot of clout behind the metrics of everything that I do right now, especially in this, I'm pretty new here, in the podcasting thing. But I'm learning as I go. And it's really about showing up and just getting better every single time that I do it. And who knows how. I know that I've had impact on people. They've emailed me or they've left comments, and that to me is bonus. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. We often overlook little feedbacks like that because we're still watching a follower account or something like that. But really getting that engagement is far, like 100 times more valuable.
I totally agree with that. And so that also then the people that I do get to influence, I guess you could say, or educate, or entertain sometimes, I'm not that entertaining on it, then that is where that connection can begin, right? And so instead of cold spammy DMs in your inboxes or emails that you have too many to read anyway. This is just a whole nother way to start connecting with people. Funny enough, the last couple of calls that I've had with potential clients, they have found me on my podcast before our call. Oh, wow. And have listened to some of my episodes, and it allowed them to get to know a little bit more about me, my values, my theories, my philosophies, and how I work. And it has really been awesome. And I just now thought of that. Like the call that I had just before we're here together today, she searched me out before our call and even like cited some of the things that I had said that I teach through my podcast. So it can be such a powerful tool to have that connection before the connection even happens.
Yes. So true. So true. I know if people were to Google me, they'd probably see most of my music stuff. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with, and this is a perfect example of that, my lack of enforcing within my own regimen and schedule time to go and properly populate things and categorize things on my website, to the people I'm speaking with, how they can refer to me, what type of subtitles. Like, you have to take responsibility for your digital footprint if you plan to create one. Otherwise, it's going to end up a lot like mine. And I say that knowing 100 times better that I need to take responsibility for my digital footprint. But the truth is, you either have results or you have reasons, right? And the results speak for themselves. You look me up. I'm mostly a musician. It shows that my book was published. But so far, I haven't taken the time to go speak directly to entrepreneur and tell them, hey, look, I'd like to figure out how to create a contributor article. And that all takes your effort. You have to know that no one's going to do it for you.
It also takes a conviction, knowing what you want. Yeah. And I think that makes us get stuck a little bit. I've been listening to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, and it's pretty good. I was a little leery. I'll be honest.
All right.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? Like, I can only handle so much of it. But no, it's been very good. And what I've learned so far, I'm about maybe over halfway through. And in fact, we were listening to it on our drive back from Dallas, Texas last weekend, and my boys were even into it. So that was like nice. But some things about him, he didn't always start out wanting to be an actor. It happened while he was in college. But the way that he was brought up and the way that he was very sure about things that he wanted, he just went for them. And he curated his career on purpose, I guess you could say. And so I wonder how many of us do that, where we put ourselves out there, like how you just said about approaching entrepreneur and saying, hey, this is what I want. I'm the person. So thinking about McConaughey, when he first started, he got like some little side parts. That all right guy, that was his first thing ever. And that was his only part in the line, like in the movie, and that like kicked it off. But not just that kicked it off. It was because he went to another audition and he was just going to be another side guy, right? Some guy on a motorcycle, I think it was. I don't even know if he had any lines. And the director or someone was asking him in the office, hey, do you know somebody that would be good for the lead role for this movie? And immediately he started thinking about other people that would be great. And then he sat back and he said, yeah, me. And so it's like, how many times are you asked, who would you recommend I work with next? Or who would you recommend that we bring in to do this? Or who would you recommend for this? They're not seeing you right in front of them for whatever reason, but why not say you? I mean, but it's because he knew exactly what he wanted as well. And so if we get to define exactly what we want, then we can put ourselves in positions and go out on those limbs and give ourselves those opportunities that otherwise would have been overlooked or missed. So I think that's important.
You mentioned the idea of showing up for yourself so you can show up for others. And what you said now reminds me of, and I'm sure I'm botching it, but there's that saying where, how long will it take you if you were asked, point out a few things in the room that you love, in the room that you're in right now, how long would it take you to point to yourself and say, I love myself, you know?
Yeah. I've done several exercises like that in workshops and events that I've been to. So now I know the trick, but before I didn't know the trick, and I would be listing all these things out about all these other people and all these other things, and I would never be on the list at all. And so I totally agree with that. And even now I probably fall for it, because
It's ironic.
I have a servant heart, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with that.
No.
And I'm also a mom, and
Thinking of others is the soup du jour.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely what it is. I don't really put myself first necessarily, but over time, I've built habits that allow me to put myself first in certain ways, especially in the morning, how I start my mornings and things. It doesn't sound like much. It's not like going to the spa every afternoon or whatever, but it is giving myself that time to
Yeah.
fill my tank up a little bit before I get out here and start serving others, whether
It's
it's
so important.
online or in person in my home or whatever. So,
There's
uh,
167 hours, I think it is, by Laura Vanderkam. She wrote a book specifically addressing the trials and tribulations of being a parent of four, I think it is, and how she still finds time to manage her time. And she has an anecdote in there where she says, in the process of writing the book, she was trying to book specifically some professional, and this professional continued to put them off. And when she finally got into the office, she said, "Hey, I have an honest question. Why was it so hard for me to get a hold of you, even though I spoke to you months ago? I want to know because the book I'm writing is about time management, and it seems like you really got something under control here." And she said, "Yeah." The professional said, "You really just weren't my priority at the time."
wow.
And yeah, I mean, very point blank, but also I think a powerful lesson.
hmm Yeah, you make time for what we all have the same amount of time, right? So we
Yeah.
put in there what we want in there, and we put in there what the priority is at that time. Wow, that's pretty blunt though for a service provider to say that to somebody. Yeah, you just weren't really the priority.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit more about the human connection. I think
Awesome.
we all crave that more now than ever, as especially if you've been in this business world or entrepreneurial world where we've been used to going to events and conferences and meetups and things, and that's kind of starting to come back, but it's still been on hold for about 12 months now. How can we find ways to connect in a more human way, even
Yeah.
in the way that we're kind of separated right now? Podcasting can help with that, which we just talked about. So, what are some other ways you think that we can really
Yeah.
start showing up for one another and connecting again, even if we're not able to do that in person just yet?
Right. I mean, off the top of my head, I can tell you right now that there have been at least one or two times in the past year, right? And that's really dropping the bar really low, that you thought about calling somebody, you, the listener, and you didn't. So right away, let's just get that off the table. You thought about calling somebody, whoever it might have been, for whatever reason. It could have been to bring resolution to something, it could have just been to check in on somebody. But nowadays, we feel as if we impose on people's time by calling them. The truth is, on the other end, they're feeling the same way. So we have this +5, -5 happening at
Mm-hmm.
the same time across the board. And then the only calls we accept are the ones we know we're obligated to accept. But then it's under the pretense of an obligation instead of you just wanting to check in on somebody. And as
Yeah.
somewhere as adults, I feel like we get this idea that suddenly, because we understand how obligated we feel all the time with the way we manage our time, that we forgot how nice it is to hear from somebody who genuinely you just care about for no reason, just to check in.
Yeah.
And especially in today's world, that alone is low hanging fruit that we leave on the table every single day. When was the last
Mm-hmm.
time you called somebody just to tell them you love them? No other agenda. No, I need to get this from them.
Yeah.
No, I wonder this. Just a simple hi, how are you? I love you. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Big
Yeah.
difference for you and them. It's like the
Totally agree.
equivalent of a hug. It really
Yeah.
is. So
I
that just
definitely
off the bat,
agree.
just off the bat,
That's a great one.
just off the bat, let's start there, right? Then you can start at home. Very simple. Well, and I know this is supposed to be about business, sort of, but these things improve our
Yeah.
ability to go out into the world, right? Let's start at home, right? With what was the last time you journaled and connected with yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe journaling isn't for everybody, but you know what? You can also just record a voice note and speak out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to hear yourself talk to understand what you're feeling. The truth is, there's this great book called The Untethered Soul
Oh
uh,
yeah.
by Michael Singer, right? Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
very reminiscent of a book I read a long time ago when I was 14. I'm 32 now. When I was 14, I read a book which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, The Four Agreements
Oh
by
yes.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Mm-hmm.
But they both talk about the same thing, right? And I'll give this anecdote. In the Four Agreements, there's four agreements like don't take anything personal, don't assume, always do your best, and I think the other one is be impeccable with your word,
Yeah.
in no particular order, right? But what I remember from that book, which connects to the Michael Singer book Untethered Soul, is if you're the voice inside your head, who is the person listening? So we have this jumbled noise in our head, right? And we think that's us. We think the emotions that we carry are us. We think the fears, we think these crazy thoughts that we have, like I,
I know.
getting cut off while you're driving. I want to kill this person. Do you
Yeah.
really? No. But again, and then we forget. Just like there's Wi-Fi and there's things we can't see, but they're there. Sometimes the people we're around also influence our thoughts. So again, journaling, speaking out loud. If you don't have somebody you can call and say, "Hey, I just need somebody to talk to," which also takes courage.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Amy Morin, she wrote a book called "The 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do." Right? And she's adamant about saying people who are mentally strong are people who actually are willing to ask for help. And sometimes the help you need is just an ear to talk to. But if you don't preface that and you come to someone with complaints and they have no idea why and they try to offer you solutions,
Yeah.
I this is all about connection, because the minute you can get this junk out of the way, now you can be very present for people around you. And often our businesses and our endeavors suffer from a lack of connecting with ourselves before connecting with others.
Definitely agree with that. And maybe you can relate if you've ever had something happen before a meeting or before an appointment, right? And that's all that you could think about. Maybe you had a fight with your spouse, or maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe, your child is sick in the hospital, but you still have to have responsibilities and do things. If you, those things can just loom and take up space and redirect any of your energy or focus off of what needs to be taken care of. So yeah, I totally can understand how dealing with your own connection and being to be able to connect to others. There's so many times that I haven't wanted to surface at all to connect with anything or anyone. Especially, over the last 12 months, right? There's been a lot of times where it's like, I'll just stay here, watch some TV and not talk to any people, including my kids in my house, right? I just
Yeah.
didn't want to talk to anybody. So I can completely understand where you're coming from and definitely agree that you have to nurture your own personal connection so you can then go out and really nurture others. That's what people really need, I think, is just that. What is it? People want to be seen and
Yeah.
heard and understood.
And sometimes mostly seen and heard and understood from themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of that quietude. And Alfred Adler, a psychologist who was a contemporary to Sigmund Freud, actually, he should have been more popular, but his approach to psychology, personal psychology, was more of a process and evolution than it was a systematized product, which explains why Freud was able to move forward, whereas Alfred Adler was sort of forgotten but always studied by everyone who studies
Mm-hmm.
psychology. And one of the things he talks about, whenever you see antisocial behavior, it's important to understand that really is someone who has fallen off of what would be a productive and evolving path. And the reason for that has a lot to do with that. There's no clarity. It's like an abstract painting. And so that's why I say journaling,
Mm-hmm.
speaking out loud, going for a run and thinking through things,
Yeah.
right? Exhausting the emotional energy behind it so that you can actually just have the mental energy behind it, and then
Yeah.
exhausting that until it becomes a spiritual energy. It's all about the transformation of all those things and of yourself. So if you're ever upset and you don't know, well, obviously the first step is getting clarity, and you have to understand how clarity occurs for you. Once you have clarity, and this comes from my mentor, he tells me all the time, first you get clarity, then you get the confidence, then you get to execution, right? And
Mm-hmm.
execution can be as simple as finally going to have a conversation with someone. But if you don't know yourself, you don't know what you're feeling, you don't know why you're feeling this way, you don't even know what you want to talk about, there's a there's a very unpopular organization that has a very amazing tool that most people don't know about because the organization is so unpopular. But I'll share it here without saying what the organization is because it tends to be very unpopular, and first share the tool, right? And I'm
Okay.
in the middle of putting all these things together into a book that's
Uh-huh.
probably going to come out once I can thoroughly research it because I want it to be my life's work, right? But that being
Yeah.
said, this thing here is a triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
ARC, 3 points, right? And the cornerstone of that triangle is the C, which is communication.
Okay.
Then the other two, the A and the R, are affinity and reality. Okay. Now, affinity, reality, communication. Anytime any one of those drops, the other drop.
Huh.
The others also drop. It shrinks the triangle, right? Now, if you want to expand the triangle, you have to understand that you must communicate, right? Affinity, reality, communication. When you fall out of communication with someone, you're no longer even living in the same reality, let alone having affinity with each other, which is an emotional connection,
Okay.
right?
I love that. Yeah.
So, that being said, anything you want to learn in life is also thrown into this. If you don't have an affinity with a guitar and you're trying to learn guitar, you're in two different realities. And the only way to improve that is through communication with the guitar, communication with the subject matter, communication with the loved one, with the business, industry, whatever it's going to be. Communication is the cornerstone of the growth of your reality merging with whatever other reality you're trying to merge with. This is why they talk about in the law of attraction, right? You have to visualize. And what do you think you're doing there? You're communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Our singular ability is to profoundly communicate with our environment, internally and externally, as human beings. And so it's important that we understand that the power we have behind our communication is everything, and how we approach it and what we approach it with is going to define everything for us at a very fundamental atomic level.
That's
So,
so amazing. I have so many examples how that could be applied.
so make sure you communicate so that you can bridge the reality and therefore affinity, and
Yeah,
on and on and on and on.
that's wonderful. And not to be Debbie Downer or whatever, like breaking the cycle of this amazing, expansive conversation, but the communication channel, which can be anything. It can be within yourself. It could be with a journal. It could be with a podcast. It could be with social media. It could be in person, actually, face to face with people. That is, there's no limit to how we can communicate with one another. And but we have to keep that line open, right? And
Yeah.
we can communicate for all different reasons too. Like we can communicate why or how to do something, right? Or how you're feeling or how they're feeling. Like there's no limit to what you can communicate about. But I love the fact that you can bring somebody into your own reality based on the communication or the conversation that you have. And it totally makes sense. If you're having an argument with someone, they see their reality on this side and you see yours on this side. That's why there's a conflict, because you're not having this same vision of where you're at. So that
Mm-hmm.
communication, the difficult conversation sometimes, is what's needed to bring those. They might not ever match those levels of reality, but at least you can bring them a little bit closer together.
Yeah.
So and you may not want to go into their reality. You just might want to say, no, I'm staying over here. And that's okay too. Right. So just
Yeah.
having those conversations. I love the idea of the thing you can do to really improve communication right now and connection is just picking up that phone. Or, and I'll say this because sometimes, yes, making a phone call is a little bit intimidating and put offing, if that's a word. Send a text.
Yeah.
How about that? A coach of mine, Seth Humphrey, he's amazing. He's taught me so much over the last years, like 5 or 6 years, and helped me get through a lot of difficult times. One of the things that he has his program members do every single day is send 3 text messages to different people, right? He's kind of like a roulette wheel, right? Who's the lucky one today? They're not based, you don't send it based on the result you're going to get from it, right? First of all, you show up for yourself because it's something you have to do consistently every day. But it's also not for you. It's for the recipient. And sometimes I'm the lucky recipient of Seth's texts. And they just say that he's happy that I'm in his life, or that he's grateful for me. He's not banking on me reciprocating that text like, oh, thank you so much, whatever. No, it's okay if you don't get a response at all. That's not why you're doing it. You're doing it for the person on the other end. And so that's something that I have let go a little bit of, sending those texts. I'm usually pretty open with the people that I have close in my life. But if we want to talk about business connection, there's something that I was reminded of. My great friend Corey Peterson does this better than almost anyone that I know. And he sends handwritten notes to people all the time. I'm not even in business with him, and I will still receive a letter in the mail from him. And it's just the most, and I have them saved on my shelves over here. They're not something fancy. They're not over embellished or anything like that, but they're just genuinely a note of appreciation. And I think there's a lost art in that. Christopher Voss, he's also a person that I admire in his teachings of building relationships with people that we want to do business with. And he had a lesson not long ago about sending a handwritten note out to people that are in your community, and I'm talking in the business kind of entrepreneurial world. And that is something that I strive to get better at. And just think, if like I'm an entrepreneur, I help people build their businesses online. You've entered my email address somehow, or maybe you've bought a product from me a long time ago, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you get a note from me in your mailbox. And all it says is that I'm grateful for you. I'm happy you're here. If you need anything, whatever. Like, it's not a pitch. It's not got underlying, salesy undertones, anything like that. It's just expressing genuine gratitude for these people that have come across your path, and showing them. And it doesn't have to take millions of dollars or fancy Facebook ads or a ClickFunnels website or anything like that, right? It takes a little bit of time and a little bit of emotion. And that's about it. That's all people really want, your time, and you to just be present with them. And that's all it is. And I think that, saying this again, I've said it a few times on different interviews, it must mean that I really want to do it, because they keep bringing it up. So that's something
I really want to write a letter.
I know. And I have a drawer right here in my desk full of note cards, and I need to do them. So
there's no reason why you shouldn't.
Yeah. That connection, it does not have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be through a fancy podcast, which, by the way, is not that difficult to begin in the long run. Anybody could do it, really.
Yeah, it's a very simple process. I think editing is the hardest part of having a podcast.
But you just learn. You can learn as you go. That's the thing.
And you can delegate it. Any smart person would.
Yeah.
If you really don't have, if you don't have the time, don't try to force it into your schedule. You can find editors, especially if you already know what you're looking for. You can make sure the editor doesn't mess up. I always say, especially with the power of reaching out to people, it's not even like there's two things, right? Number one, there's a great book that'll light a fire under your butt to help you see the consequence of this. It's called Givers and Takers by Adam Grant. And
Okay.
it basically, after reading this, you're going to want to do something nice for someone,
Oh,
just
nice.
because of the strength and the power of it. There's that, right? And then even in my own book, I talk about in Pushing Past the Norm, I talk about the thing of like, there's people you already know, opportunities you already have. But how are you supposed to know that these opportunities exist if you're not staying in touch with the people you already know? Um, my mentor, Joe Apfelbaum, right? He's a digital marketing agency founder, successful in New York. And I used to sit because I used to work for him before I went to work for myself. And then he took me on as a mentee because he respected the way I left the company and the reason why I was leaving the company, that he made the first few introductions for me and everything. And so one of the things I always saw him do would he'd be on the phone with all the prospects and people that we're already working with. And he'd say, look, he's a B2B person, right? So you're busy looking for new clients, this and that. He says, but you're not going deeper with the ones you already have. How
Mm-hmm.
much other value can you contribute to the people that you
Yeah.
already know? That's why I say opportunities you already have, people you already know. In my book, there's literally like 14. It's supposed to be for teenagers, but there's a lot of lessons that I think even as adults we need to be reminded of. And one of those is reaching out to people you already know. You'd be surprised what happens when you talk to your cousin and who they ran into the other day and how it connects to what you're doing. But if you don't stay on top, if you don't stay on their same page, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
communicate as part of that
Yeah.
triangle, forget about it.
Forget about it. So tell me about this book. Is it available?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay. What's the title of it?
Pushing past the norm.
Oh, I said that in the intro. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
have the link in the notes because I think it's really important. And even if it is for like, you originally wrote it for teens, I think there is a lot of value in there for anybody that
Yeah, yeah.
you've given us a lot of value here today. That's for
Thank
sure.
you.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time. You're like this walking uh Dewey Decimal System. Like you have every single book cataloged in your brain. It's
Well,
amazing.
that's only because books saved my life. I grew up without parents for crazy reasons. I mean, one reason being my father had ALS, like at the age of 8, like full blown. I watched it
Wow.
progress, and so he couldn't really take care of me anymore. And he kind of like tried to hand me off to his brothers. But being that I'm half Mexican and half American, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anglo white, right? And so my mother wasn't around. She was kind of a runaway and a kid herself, struggling with her own problems. So my father, an immigrant, trying to pass me off to his other immigrant brothers who like are probably also struggling.
Yeah.
I sat there and heard the "He's not our kid" speech. What are we gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
And so getting passed around that way, right? Hearing that as a kid, and then eventually being thrown because I couldn't stay anywhere else with my mother, who stepdad number 6.
Yeah.
You know, I picked up skateboarding and ran away like any other kid would do, right? And I just kind of stayed outside all the time,
Yeah.
and I would make friends constantly. I would have to learn how to see other people for who they are really early on.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I eventually found my way with a Greyhound ticket back to Los Angeles from San Antonio, where I ended up at eventually, to move in with my cousins who were about 18 to 21, kind of already living that adult life.
Yeah.
And I was with them. I got a job at a pizza place early on, while I was in school. 2 hours over to West LA so I could go to a better school, 2 hours back. Nobody was making me
Wow.
go to school. Nobody was making me go to school. I wanted to. And one day I was sitting there at home and hating school because I was like, I don't really relate to what's happening because I
Yeah.
can't concentrate. I'm emotionally traumatized. I see the book, The Four Agreements. And like I said earlier, if you're the person listening, then who's the voice talking,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're the voice inside your head, who is the person listening is how it's actually said. And I said, wow, I'm not these angry thoughts I have. Those are the voices of my father and mother and
That's
whoever else
really
it might be.
profound at that young age to have that realization.
Yeah, well, to be frank with you, I was doing something illegal, which was smoking weed at the time. I don't do it anymore, obviously, but at that time I was high. I was 14 because I was living with 18 and 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell you what that life was like, but
Yeah.
nobody was making me do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that realization. I let go of a lot of my anger and started reading voraciously, right? I started reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. Before I even graduated high school, I could no longer relate to anyone in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why I say, like, there was a big deep seated fear that if I don't go to college, will I be seen as educated? So then I even went to the library that summer after high school and started learning how to read and write in Korean. As you can see, our insecurities can drive us to do great things or poor choices.
Right.
But it's our choice to do that. And that's why when I wrote the book, Pushing Past the Norm, it was sort of an encapsulation of all the things I think I learned very young that I wanted to pass off to others. And the thing is, you won't even understand them until you're older. So it's going
Yeah.
to take that leap of faith that I took myself. And I know it's going to probably serve better, like underserved kids who come from terribly traumatizing neighborhoods and backgrounds, and they may never even hear it. I hope one day I reach a platform where I can actually garner their attention enough, whether it's through TikTok or wherever, to actually have them see how you don't have to fall into the gangs. Or I grew up in East LA at some point, like you don't have to give into the anger and the viciousness and go into drugs and spiral out of control just because you want attention or whatever you think you want from your parents. There is a way to develop yourself as an individual where you can stand respected, respect others, and still pursue your goals one brick by boring brick at a time.
Yeah. That's fascinating. It's so good. And it is relatable to people of all ages and of all backgrounds also. There's not one person that I know that hasn't had some trial or tribulation in their life. Granted, it may not have been as at the degree, right, as other people, but we've all had obstacles to overcome and had to find that resilience from within to do something with what we've been given. And so I think while yes, it can definitely help a lot of young people, I think it can help really any people. And I think it's fantastic. It's inspiring to say the least.
Wow. Thank you.
And I do hope that you get the platform, or even how about this? I just don't want you to create the platform. I don't want you to wait for it. I want you to create it. Because that's what this is really all about. You get to create. So a lot of people that I work with, they want to become speakers, right? Eventually, after they go through the progression and they find the success. Now they either want to show others how to have that success or teach others how to get through something or whatever. And a lot of times we just say, well, how do we book ourselves on different stages, right? How do we get on podcasts or events or whatever? And a lot of times we overlook the fact that we have the power to create our own stage. Yeah. So for you too, Phillip, I want you to create your own stage. That's my challenge to you.
Okay, challenge accepted. Yeah, the truth is, I often put it on the back burner because I'm focused on other things. But I do know that sometimes just having made it to this age and this state of mind is a success in itself.
Absolutely. But that success is worthy of being shared with others, which you're doing right now, by the way, which is fantastic. And you continue to do that every single day that you show up in one way or another, because you do have a servant's heart as well. And you do show up not only for yourself consistently, but to also help serve others too. So I appreciate you being here with us today, sharing your wisdom. Seriously. And I hope that you come back. I want to talk some more about some of these things that I took a lot of notes. So I want to have more conversations with you. So thanks again. One thing before we go, how can people find you online? Where would you like people to go to find Phillip Lanos on the interwebs?
Okay, yeah. I'm most active on Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn for business-related things, and also just to check on like people I care about who have been mentors to me. And then on Instagram because I'm just random and weird on there. And every now and then you'll see something cool, maybe something from my past where you'll be like, wait, he sings? Wait, he does this? Because I got really good at a lot of things that I never ended up doing anything with. It just happens to be part of my insecurity as I continue to overdevelop myself. My mentor tells me, you don't need to learn something else. You need to start doing something about what you already know. So I appreciate the holding me to accountability of building a platform, but that's where you can find me.
Okay. We'll be finding you there. And then again, also in the links in the notes, go look him up, get that book, follow him online, and join us here next time.
And I think I shared a link with you, Amanda.
Oh,
It's a
yes.
little podcasting course primer. It does everything. Goes through everything except editing, because I really do personally believe you should
Outsource
just
that.
delegate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Your free gift. Thank you so much. How to get started with your podcast from the champion himself. I'm going to dig into it too. I'll probably learn a few new things myself on that. So thanks so much, Phillip. Can't wait to see you again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Okay. See you guys. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't done that already. And if you'd like to check out more of our videos, go ahead and just tap the screen right here.